What's up, YouTube? So this one is going to be about the Brothers Johnson's musical influences. Now, if you were a fan of the Brothers Johnsons, you remember they were two brothers, I think, and plus there was another brother and a cousin or something that were formed in the mid to late 70s. And of course, most people know about them playing on Quincy Jones's Mellow Magic's album, but they had actually started off with Stevie Wonder, and before they had played with Billy Preston. And then they formed their own duo, and what they created starting 76, I'll Be Good to You, and then a lot of classic songs, of course, with Stomp, and then George Johnson on guitar and Louis Thunder Thumps on bass. You remember them. But anyway, their musical influences, like when you hear their music, you kind of, they were from California, and they took on a lot of that vibe and element, a lot of the stuff that you hear, certain things that you would hear. And you'd be curious as to what their foundation was, because I remember reading that Louis Johnson had mentioned Ray Brown and even of course James Jamerson, because if you're going to talk about the bass, you got to start with James Jamerson, that Motown bottom. I'm sure there was a lot of Motown influence on what they did artistry wise. I mean, you can hear certain things, obviously. But I would say that if I was front and center about who their main influence is, it's got to be Sly and the Family Stone. Um, Now, Strawberry Letter 22 was, originally a cover song. And, it's interesting when you take them the psychedelic aspects, because with the Beatles influence, with Sly and the Family Stones influence, and you take everything that they did, and you just kind of like you are kind of like compartmentalizing. um it's one of those things that um you're trying to grasp all that, and so you're kind of like putting that in perspective though. But they took the song originally from Shuggy Otis. So Shuggy was the originator of it. And it had a direct reference. It felt like a Sly Stone. It felt Sly and the Family Stone felt like a Beatles type of song. Their other influences was obviously Earth, Wind, and Fire, because when they did the call and response and chants with their musicality, it was. But anything, the Sly and the Family Stone to that, I would say maybe a nod to War. Um, Quincy Jones's styling was a big time influence, 'cause especially with Seahorn, Jerry Hayden, and with the horns. If you're familiar with Seahorn, you can definitely tell with them horns. Billy Preston, they did. I think they played on Nothing from Nothing, because I know they were in the video. Some they were associated. They had associates with him and Ray Charles. So that musicality had to play a part. There was certain type of rhythms and grooves that they came up with. So I would say Sign the Family Stone, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Quincy Jones, a nod to Stevie Wonder. Um, and a low key nod to like West Coast jazz funk, I would say. I would say there was a nod to it. There might be a few artists that might come to mind in the vein of the way they played. I'd say that. Um, it's one of those things that you kind of pick up on, you're trying to grasp. So that's kind of how I would, put in totality. But um, definitely a nod towards that. And they made some some strong music. Obviously their stuff with Quincy Jones era was probably my favorite. I liked a lot. I liked their songs, and then of course they work with different producers. But I think that if we're gonna go from 76 to probably about 76 to 81 was the prominent peak, and I like the stuff in 84 when they work with Leon Silvers. You keep me coming back, but I think 76 to 81 was their heyday, where they had the real grooves, and that all that stuff with Quincy Jones was grooving for the most part. Of course, you remember the instrumental "Tomorrow Better You Better Me," which Tevin Campbell turned into a vocal performance. So you know, but very distinctive sound they were. So it's cool to go down memory lane with their musical influences. Let me know what you think. Please hit like, subscribe, welcome thoughts, comments, and I do respond. Thank you. Wash your hands, keep your mind clear, watch out for another. Share it if you like, and hit that membership. Stay safe, stay blessed, stay woke, stay free. I'm out. Peace.